So, our wonderful mayor of Santa Monica, Kevin McCune, has waved his magic wand, and the magic, our city manager is here. Please welcome the past mayor of the city of Pasadena, the past right-hand person to Mayor Garcetti of Los Angeles, and now our city manager, Rick Cole. Welcome.
So I am not a member of any organized political party. I'm a Democrat. And yes, it's an old Will Rogers line. But I actually figured, being Democrats, it would take you a while to get started, and I could safely come a little late, so I apologize for being late. I was on my way. I think the most valuable use of our time is in dialogue. And you don't have to, if you have a speech to give, you don't have to disguise it in the form of a question. I'm still very much in a listening mode of coming to understand the many and diverse voices and perspectives of this extraordinarily diverse and dynamic community. So if you have some advice to give me, or you have some concerns you want to share with me, I am quite open to hearing those perspectives. I think it would probably be helpful, even though I'm speaking to a room full, including two of the folks who serve on the city council. I'm talking to a room of people who are very well informed. I do think it probably grounds us, because I get this question almost every place I go, to ground you a little bit in my understanding of what a city manager is. You may have your own, or you may wonder, what exactly is a city manager? Then I'd like to talk with you about what is coming out of City Council as a result of our weekend workshop. And then I'd like to, again, throw it open to an opportunity for dialogue, for a two-way exchange of view. So what does a city manager do? Well, there are 488 cities in California. There are probably 450 city managers in California. And depending upon the size of the city, the complexity of the city, the culture of the city, the political climate in the city, and to some extent the personality and background of the city manager, there's, of course, a variation in what a city manager does and how the job is defined. But in the textbook, we'll start there. The textbook is that the council sets policy. They're elected, they're responsible to you, and they direct a chief executive officer to implement their policy. So that's my job as a city manager, is I serve at the pleasure of the city council. That's a term of art. And that means that on any Tuesday with 24 hours notice, they can decide that they would like a different city manager. So I don't have a fixed term or anything like that. So the nature of the job is, what have you done for me lately? But my responsibility is for the part of the government that you never see. So diverting a minute from the textbook. 90% of the government of a city, and particularly this city, is essentially invisible to the naked eye. People don't pay attention to the water mains unless they break. People don't pay attention to the quality of the water unless it's polluted. People don't pay attention much to the police department unless they're burglarized or have a car break-in or have an unfortunate encounter on the street with one of our officers, or read about an unfortunate incident that happens in law enforcement in their town. So that's what I mean by it's essentially, we take most of what happens in government for granted. We have a lot of things to do in our lives, and paying attention to the day-to-day is not what we do. That's even more true in the city of Santa Monica. I spent the last 2 months actively and consciously and intentionally spending a lot of time in the organization and in the community. I had a wonderful luxury in that the council chose as the interim city manager the longtime assistant city manager, Elaine Polachek. She's a remarkable professional. She did a great job for 6 months.
Who?
Elaine Polachek. she did a great job for 6 months, and I said, basically, Elaine, you keep running the day-to-day, and I'm going to spend a lot of time. So I've been out on police ride-alongs with some of our patrol officers. I've had lunch at a couple of our fire stations. I've been out on fire calls. I've gone to our water treatment plant, our $75 million water treatment plant, which is not even in the city of Santa Monica, because, of course, water doesn't respect city boundaries. I've been to the airport. I've been to all of our branch libraries, including one that's closed. I've been out into the departments where very few city managers go. Today, I stopped by our city yards and was talking to some of our garbage truck drivers. And they said, our bosses don't even say hello, and we're talking to the city manager. And so they invited me back and offered to buy me lunch next time.
You might want to bring your own around that.
We do not recycle lunch. I have that on the highest authority. But I've consciously been out learning this organization. It's the first city I've ever been involved with, which has a cemetery. That's an unusual thing for a city to be running. Of course, we have an airport, not necessarily one we want, but we do. So it's a complicated challenge. And when things are going right, you don't have to worry about it. But things don't go right just because we stay on top of the day-to-day. Things also go right because we've hired the right people, we've trained them in the right way, we've built a culture and a structure that rewards good behavior and penalizes poor behavior. It's not something that you just today do a good job. Unless today you're thinking about next year, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, and really investing in the capacity of the organization, the infrastructure of the city, the things that people take for granted. If the city manager takes those for granted, then you wake up 3-5 years down the road and you wake up and you see the streets like they are in the city of LA. Right? That did not happen overnight. Quick statistic, and then I'll switch to where we're going in the future. So I'm a data guy. Really pay attention to numbers. And last year in the city of Los Angeles, and our numbers are not all that reliable in Los Angeles, but this is a pretty reliable number. We filled 350,000 potholes. 350,000 potholes.
Potholes?
Yes. The city of Santa Monica filled 458 potholes. Right? And so you might say that the city of Los Angeles is doing way better, right? Because, wow, they like 1,000 times as many potholes as us, even though they're only 40 times bigger. But in fact, it's the opposite. It's the opposite, right? The fact that there are only 458 potholes to fill in Santa Monica is as good as any an indicator of how well the city is managed. Because what we do is preventive maintenance. We don't wait till a street is full of holes, send a truck with hot asphalt and 2 guys to come dig out the hole, dump the hot asphalt, roll it in, and then come back 6 months later when the whole thing is broken again. That's the way they fix streets in Los Angeles. The way we fix them here is every 3 years we slurry seal them, every 5 years, if they need it, we come through with an overlay, and every 20 or 30 years you do a more serious repair. That's the least expensive, most efficient, most environmentally sound way to fix streets, and that's how we do it in Los Angeles, in Santa Monica. And you take it for granted, as you should, right? You shouldn't stay up at night wondering, that's my job. And it's my job to make sure we're on top of that. Not that I'm out there supervising the guys laying the slurry seal. But unless me or my predecessor or my successor is thinking ahead and figuring out Maybe there are new, more environmentally sound ways of doing street paving. Maybe there are new, less costly ways of doing street paving. Unless someone is thinking about those things, they don't just happen. And it's been my experience that in Santa Monica, because the city has been so well run for so long, and because so much of that is invisible, because so much of that is taken for granted, people are pissed off. Right? So I talk to people, and I'm not just talking about, the self-appointed leaders. I'm also talking about when I just go to a group of ladies playing bridge at the main library here the other day, down in the foyer, in the courtyard. I didn't realize why they were pissed for a number of reasons, but the first one was that they used to play bridge at Fairview. And so they're pissed that they can't play bridge at Fairview, they have to come to this library. Because we've closed it for repairs, much needed renovations. But I chatted with them, and it's kind of what I've heard from many, many of the voices. I love the libraries. We have fantastic libraries, great librarians, great collection. Yeah, take my grandkids to Story Hour, And we have great parks. We should have more parks, but the parks we have are really well maintained. The bathrooms are clean. The staff are great. It's great to see all the kids and the programs and the ballet classes and all the things that take place there. I don't see the police much, but boy, they're terrific. They're polite. They're professional. They seem terrific. Firefighters, they go the extra mile and tell me some story about a firefighter that helped them with their plumbing or who knows what. On and on about how great this or that. Blue Bus is great. And then they say, I hate the city. And I say,
How can they say that?
well, what they mean is they hate traffic. Right?
Right.
And that's all the city's fault. And they hate the way in which it seems like the community that they know and love is changing and being buried by overdevelopment. And they also mean that they've been reading the newspaper. And I guarantee you will never see a headline in the newspaper, City Hall does a good job again today. No water leaks today, right? All police calls answered today. These are not headlines you will ever see. What you will see is, in a city with 2,000 employees, 93,000 residents, 4 million annual visitors to the pier, 4 million people on the promenade at any given time, it seems like sometimes.
No.
You're right. It is a little bit of an exaggeration. Yes, you caught me.
Well, I just live right down the street from the promenade, so.
You're right. So when you have a complicated city, there's always going to be stuff that people are unhappy with, right? And sometimes it's important, and sometimes it's trivial, but that's how they fill the newspapers, right? That's what you read. So if every day you're reading about some omission, or some controversy, or some mistake, or some scandal, or some political warfare going on, that's what the city is, right? You're not thinking, wow, it's the parks, it's the library, it's the police, it's the fire, it's the big blue bus. You're thinking it's those terrible people at City Hall doing up to terrible things. So there's that mismatch between sometimes people's perception of what's going on below the surface and what's going on, kind of in the public eye. So let me switch gears a little bit, and we can talk about your perceptions and your thoughts about that dynamic. Let me switch gears. So I come to Santa Monica, and I talked with the city council. I was interviewed along with, I'm sure, some extraordinary candidates, because this is an amazing city to have even to be considered to be hired to be the city manager. And I said to the council in that interview, I said, because I had done, as I'm sure the others who were applying, I'd done some study. I've been following this city for 30 years, since I was in Pasadena and paying attention to all the remarkable things that have gone on here. I said, my observation, council members, with respect, is you have a little bit of a challenge. You have about 15 top 3 priorities. So then I come on the job and I was wrong. You have about 25 top 3 priorities. And by that what I mean is, let me just tick off half a dozen of them to give you a flavor. So the council, when it adopted the zoning code, decided that we will move forward with the bold experiment of trying to do what so many cities have not done well, which is to legalize marijuana dispensaries, to find a safe and convenient and legal way to regulate that very controversial industry. So you might think, oh, well, we'll just do that day after tomorrow. But hugely complicated undertaking, just fraught with significant peril and controversy. That's a small one. We have the Expo line coming. This is $1.5 billion public investment that's been decades in the making. It's the biggest public investment and the biggest change in transportation in 50 years since the 10 freeway opened in 1965. And that's just one of the things we're working on, right? And how are we working on it? Well, we're working to minimize accidents, because there will be accidents, and we want to make sure they're not tragic accidents. We're working because there are going to be probably 4,000 more people coming into our town every day, so we're working on the making sure that it's well policed and people feel safe getting on and getting off the train. We're working on fire dispatch, because we're going to have potential accidents and problems and challenges, but also it's going to be hard to get fire trucks north and south, because there are going to be more trains going east and west. There's going to be more traffic challenges in the city. Traffic is already bad, and so you have trains running through, and there are going to be some conflicts between the trains and the cars and the bikes and the people. So we're working on those challenges that are going to come up. But there's also this enormous opportunity. We spend $1.5 billion. We ought to get some value out of that. So beginning to change the way we think. People have not adapted yet to the opportunity. This is really not just another rail line that you may or may not ride. This is Santa Monica connecting up to a completely new way of moving around the Los Angeles region. Now with 5 different light rail and subway lines under construction as we're speaking, this is becoming, we're not New York, we're not Chicago, but we are not the LA that all of us grew up with. This is a different modality, this is a different mobility model, and we need to seize that opportunity. You go through the long list of things that we're working on. Affordable housing. Cutting our water use by 25% to the drought, and eliminating entirely imported water by 2025. Hugely ambitious goal. So I could just keep on ticking off these big, important challenges that the city is working on. And the trouble is, we can do any of them. We just can't do all of them at the same time and do them well. So the council on Sunday identified 3 top priorities. These are strategic goals that we're really going to commit to doing over the next 3 to 5 years and have measurable results, and they will hold me accountable for delivering them. I will not do that just with our city staff. I will need to work with all of you as partners in the community, with institutions in our community, and beyond, in many cases, regional agencies.
What are they?
They are mobility, right? That's our word for traffic, because there's no magic wand to make traffic go away. And even if we stopped all development for the next 20 years, traffic would still get worse for a whole bunch of demographic and the fact that we're surrounded by LA on 3 sides. So there's no magic answer to traffic, but we can begin to take advantage of bike share, Uber, Lyft, Expo line, zip cars, and walking, which we proved actually Southern Californians will do. They do it on 3rd Street Promenade, they do it on Ocean Avenue, and maybe they could even do it in other places. And so mobility is we're beginning to, because we don't want to be trapped by this mess of traffic. We want to find new and creative and affordable and safe alternatives. Number two is maintaining the diversity of this community. It's no surprise to anyone here. It's been going on for a long time. It's a very attractive place to live. And housing prices, both on the rental side and on the home ownership side, have really kind of gone through the roof. And how we deal with that is not an easy challenge, but that we have to deal with it is core to the values of what Santa Monica is and what it wants to remain. A diverse and inclusive community. The third is the airport. Now, the council has not said we want to close the airport. Individual council members have said that, and I think the majority, if you tallied them up, and I think they're all in agreement. But what they are, the goal is to implement Measure LC, which says it is the will of the people of the city of Santa Monica, that the people of Santa Monica who own that airport ought to decide what happens there. And we have to win a battle with the FAA to be able to implement the mandate of the people. It is our land, and we should have local control over the decisions on the future of that airport. That is the third priority. Two more, as I said, 3 to 5 I think is something that I can manageably say to you I can be held accountable for. The fourth is something we're all conscious of. It's a long-running issue in the community. Homelessness has sometimes been the #1 issue in Santa Monica. We have done a remarkably good job in this community at not ending homelessness, but managing and trying to alleviate homelessness. But we are not alone, and this has now become a regional crisis. There's a significant upsurge, not just in the number of homeless people, but in the severity of mental illness and the severity of how troubled folks are, how long they have been out on the street. There's no local solution to that. We have to work aggressively and effectively with the county, with the Veterans Administration, with the City of Los Angeles. We have a lot to teach them, but we're also going to have to work with them, and we're going to have to find ways to work together because, frankly, the homeless people, you cannot build a Trump-style wall to keep homeless people out of this community. This is a reality that we can't solve on our own, but we have to be a major player, and the council is committed to do that. And the fifth is something that's I don't think people in Santa Monica fully appreciate. There's a lot of things you don't fully appreciate from someone coming from Los Angeles. But one of the things is this city does more for public education than any other city in the state of California, bar none, full stop. Now, there are always people who say you should do more, and that's a fair opinion. But most cities' response to issues of education is, well, that would be the school board, right? And this city has really embraced a partnership with the school district, a financial partnership with the school district, and a very close working relationship across all kinds of programs and initiatives, including Cradle to Career. And we are really committed to lifelong learning, to kindergarten readiness, to helping kids get ready to go into the public schools, to working with a community college once they leave Samo High, and on lifelong learning through a library and through other efforts that we're involved in. So the fifth is to continue and deepen that partnership and to achieve the kind of results that we all believe in, the importance of investing in our future. So that's what we have to look forward to. That's not the only thing we're going to focus on, and I reassured the council, we're not going to drop everything else, but we are really going to focus on delivering measurable results on those five priorities. Because if you try to work, we all experience this, whether in our work lives or in our home lives, if you're trying to do 16 things at once, there's a limit to multitasking, right? And at some point you have to sort of say, okay, I'm just going to focus on getting this done, check it off the list, and then I can go on to the next thing. That's really kind of the idea behind this strategic goals effort. And that will really be my job as city manager, is to organize the efforts to achieve those goals, to make sure that we get the job done. And again, I want to reiterate, I won't be able to do that with just our city staff. We'll have to build partnerships. Tackling homelessness involves churches, nonprofits, law enforcement, a whole range of community partners. Similarly, affordable housing, similarly mobility. All of these things require a lot of folks, and even the airport. We have a lot of active, engaged, well-informed resources in the community who can help us win this battle to win local control. So it will ultimately be all about partnerships. But in the end, I think in the city manager, city council form of government, I have to be accountable to making sure we build those partnerships. I have to be accountable to make sure that those partnerships work. And I have to be accountable to making sure we deliver the results that matter most to the community in Santa Monica. So with that, that's kind of an introduction. And I look forward to, again, your thoughts.
Okay, so among the frustrations.
We have a microphone for you.
I have a lot of noise, but maybe-
We have bad ears.
Among the frustrations, and maybe one of the reasons why the bridge ladies said they didn't like the city, is how do you, and in this case, you're new, you have history as well as new ideas, but how do we break what can be seen, and I think some of us do see, as calcification? So we see a problem in the city, and we say, we need to have this taken care of, whatever it is, about employees, about any number of things. And so it goes to you, you're an outgoing city manager who is dealing with people, and then it goes, before it goes to the council, it goes to staff for a staff report, which likely comes back basically keeping things in the status quo, what we've been doing. So what is the solution to making it a challenge and breaking through whatever the old thinking is to have a result that is different from what we've undergone last year and 5 years ago and 10 years ago and 20 years ago?
Tell me your name.
I'm Julie Dodd.
Julie, that is both a...
By the way, like Jay, I'm a former planning commissioner, former president of this club, former rent
Sure.
board commissioner.
Sure.
So we
Sure.
kind of have gotten into a lot of the detail.
So Julie, that is both an insightful and a perceptive question. And by the way, it is not confined to the city of Santa Monica. There's a reason why my title in Los Angeles was Deputy Mayor for Budget and Innovation. Los Angeles' middle name, if it had a middle name, would be calcification. Right?
Agreed that
Right.
compared with other cities.
Yeah.
it is
So
not- yes,
So I'm not. That is not a cause for complacency.
right.
That, in fact, is a challenge for us to be a leader. I believe this about the public sector. And again, I made a joke about being a Democrat, but that is what I have been all my life, and small d as well as large d. The public sector is, I believe, akin to the newspaper industry 20 years ago, or Detroit in the 1970s. It's essentially in denial. So I remember, like all of you in this room, it's an older crowd, apologies to some of the younger folks. I've always gone in the driveway and fished out the LA Times. As long as I can remember, right? I know, God willing, that there will come, should I survive, there's going to come a day when I'm going to go to the driveway and there's not going to be an LA Times. And sometimes when I pick it up, it barely is there as it is. And so when you crank the clock back to 1990, when Otis Chandler was running the Times, and their attitude was, we are number one. If somebody wants to advertise, they got to advertise in the Times. We are one of the best newspapers in the country, and we're going to conquer Orange County and Ventura County, and we're going to chase those, the Orange County Register out of town and all that stuff. There was a hubris about that. They were well paid, and they were arrogant, and they were wrong. They forgot what business they were in. They thought they were in the newspaper business. In the same way that today, the public sector, we think we're in the police business, the fire business, the park business, the library business. We're in the problem-solving business. Just as the LA Times was in the news business, and whether it's on paper or delivered with electrons, is a lot less important than being in the news business, to have integrity, to do your research, to be well edited. All of those things are important, and those are timeless, whether it's on paper or on a screen. And they forgot that was the important part. And so too, the public sector has become wedded to legacy solutions to problems that are no longer actually the same.
My question to you is, what's your attitude about development in Santa Monica?
What's my attitude about it?
Well, are you for development, or are you for keeping things the way they are?
Yeah. With respect, I think that's a really stupid question.
Well, thank you.
No. Hear me out. Hear me out. I think that, and by the way, that's the same question I would get asked in Pasadena or Long Beach or Los Angeles. And it was the same question asked of me as mayor of Pasadena, when I was mayor of Pasadena.
What makes it stupid?
Development comes in all sizes, and it comes in different locations, and some of it is great, and some of it is horrible. And we should allow the great stuff, and we should forbid the horrible stuff. And we have to decide that. I can't decide that. You, as a community, through your elected representatives and your planning commissioners, have to decide what you want, where you want it, and the size of it. And there are places that could use improvement, and development is good there. There are places that are great, and we don't want to develop it. We don't want to damage it. We don't want to replace it. We don't want to have things that are out of scale. So, again, there's a little bit of cuteness, and I apologize. But it is, I think when we think about development, it's such a generic thing that we need to be thinking about the quality of development and the location of development and the scale of development. And where it makes sense, we ought to have more of it, and where it doesn't make sense, we should have not less of it, we should have none of it where it doesn't make sense.
Thank you.
You mentioned, thank you. You mentioned preventative thinking was one of the points you were commenting on. Homelessness and police, and I'd like to ask a question linking all three. In particular, because you said that a big factor of the increase in homelessness is mental health issues. Now, we have seen throughout the United States many people getting killed by abuses of the police, which when you dig down to it, many cases turn out to be of a mental health nature, I would argue. So thinking forward for our city, because we certainly do not have that problem now, I've been arguing that we recruit new police officers from the graduating psychology classes, the UCLA and psychiatry classes, rather than from Iraq War veterans. We have friends who come back from the Middle East. They've settled served their 4 years thing, and they are getting calls every 3 days from the county sheriff's office, from the local police departments, from every kind of law enforcement, LAPD recruiting thing you can imagine, to bring them into, quote, law enforcement. But if we go by what you're talking about, we need to get people from the mental health community to be involved in law enforcement. Do you agree? Do you think we're on a path there that makes some sort of sense, at least for our city, instead of having, like you said, fire trucks when we really need small ambulances, instead of sending the police officers out there, we could have psychiatric help in particular? Do we think there's a path there that makes sense?
Yes. I think you're absolutely onto something. Again, this is a crisis, and when I go out with our officers, what they tell me is when they have a person with mental health issues, which is way more common today and a huge issue for them on a daily basis, they take them over, I forget where they take them, but they take them to the county facility nearby. I forget it's near, anybody know? No. But anyway, they take them to county. And it's a 3 or 4 hour wait, and the police officer can't just say, oh, it's a 3 or 4 hour wait for them to be assessed.
Got to write the hold, too.
I have to refresh my memory. So it's a 3 or 4 wait for someone to see that person and assess whether they should be committed or put on a 48-hour hold. So our police officer is sitting there for 3 or 4 hours out of the city, not patrolling our city. That's crazy, right? That's about the best word I can use for it. So I don't think, first of all, it would take a long time, and second of all, I'm not sure that in the end we want to pay $175,000 all in for social workers wearing mace and a gun and all that stuff. But I think our help team really is an interdisciplinary effort, and I think that's why we've been as successful as we have in, again, managing homelessness. Is we are way further ahead in that model, but what we haven't fully engaged is the county in sharing that model. And I'm not sure we want to invent our own county bureaucracy or have the Santa Monica Mental Health Department, but I think we definitely want to recognize that a big preventive factor in what we stack up in the statistics as crime is in fact a symptom of mental illness in our society.
Let's have a question from this side of the room. Who had their hand up? Let's go with Janice.
Here, use the mic for the other people so they can.
So the Sunday was a very effective session at establishing priorities. And I'm curious, I always think that as a matter of public policy, that the analogy of you want to keep fishing babies out of the river. At some point you want to say, look upstream and figure out who's throwing the babies in the river. So, and in keeping with our vision of our city in terms of the well-being project's objectives, how well do the priorities that we selected work if we think of them as being a way of seeing, not letting the babies get thrown in the water early on? And did we pick the best priorities from that perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question. There are a number of lenses to decide what are the most appropriate choices. But evaluating from that lens, I clearly think that from the standpoint of systematic change, again, dealing with mobility instead of trying to figure out how we're going to deal with traffic. I mean, the way to deal with traffic is more speed bumps. That's not an effective way of dealing with traffic. So I think that taking a comprehensive approach to mobility, that doesn't mean we're going to do a gazillion different things in a gazillion different directions. It does mean we're going to focus our attention on the things that work and be data-driven about that. And I think we're on the era of driverless cars that's really going to change the way we think about traffic all over the country, if not the world. The affordability, that's going to be a huge challenge because we're up against titanic market forces. Because you read about affordable housing problems in Nashville. This is acute here in Santa Monica, but it's not confined to Santa Monica. We all know that by any means. So figuring this thing out is going to be a challenge. I think it's less that less the lens of whether we should have picked this or something else from that perspective, as that let's take that perspective and apply it to those themes.
Thank you. One on this side here, Barbie.
Hi, good evening. I'm Barbie Appelquist. I'm recently elected to be the co-chair of the Early Child Education Task Force. So I'm excited that Cradle to Career is included in the partnership as part of a priority. I care about it as a mom. I have a 7.5-year-old daughter. I also care about it in terms of gender equality, because when we look at education as an opportunity for our youngest to really open up opportunities, it starts early, it starts in the beginning. And it's something the city has invested in for decades, and we've really been in the forefront of doing that. So I don't know if you could talk a little bit about the things we are doing well and what we could do to even make it a little bit better.
Sure. That's a good question. I would not be the best person after 8 weeks to give the best answer to that. One of the things, though, that occurs to me after 8 weeks of paying attention to these issues and beginning to learn about the issues and how we deal with them is connected again to this affordability issue. Because we're educating a workforce that almost by its nature is now leaving us, right? So the sense of loyalty that we're trading tomorrow's workforce for Santa Monica there's a disconnect there. And so I think that's going to be one of the challenges, and that's why I think this theme of lifelong learning is going to be so important, is how do we ensure that the people we have now living here who are out of school are gaining the skills to be successful in the 21st century economy, who are then also the parents of the kids who we're struggling to make sure get their needs met. And if the parents are economically struggling with ridiculous rents and a high cost of living and a changing economy, then they are disadvantaged and handicapped from being able to help be truly the parents that they would like to be. So I think we have to take a holistic approach and not just think about this as education is for young people. I think we have to think about education as really the cornerstone of life. And you just cannot stop learning. We have an imperative to help the parents of our young people also be on that learning track. So the best way for people to be able to afford housing if the price is going up is for their incomes to be going up. And of course, we're taking on the minimum wage challenge. That's another one of our 25 top 3 priorities. But that's an important one, and we're not doing it alone. As you know, we're doing it with the county and the city of Los Angeles.
Marcia, you have the next question.
Hi.
Hi. I'm of the JFK generation, and I volunteered for him, and his appeal, what can we do for our country?
Yes.
Is there a way, because I think the morale of the community gets better if those people that are complaining actually get challenged to volunteer and do something about it. Is there a way to even have volunteers do paperwork so your employees can do more effective work? Is even having a suggestion box that people could submit suggestions for? I think you'd find a lot of the community would be thrilled to help with any of this and not just be receiving services. And my last thing, bus stops. If you could have more bus stops that showed the schedule and maybe had for shade, a lot of us can't be in the sun. I was taking the bus, but you never know when they're coming, and you got to find shade. So I think the transportation problem might be solved with that.
Yeah.
Sure. A lot of different themes and questions. I was looking at my smartphone. We have an app called Next Bus. It's not ours. It's what good transit systems are using now. It's a very powerful software. We actually are having right now some radio problems because we just did a massive shift of routes to get ready for Expo. But NextBus is a way, even just wherever you are, even if you're a block away from the bus stop, you know when the bus is coming, which is often as helpful as knowing when you're standing there. So
you can get it on your smartphone? Or?
Yes, yeah, called NextBus. Really?
No, I don't have a smartphone, but
Got
I
it.
was on Lincoln and Wilshire,
Mhm.
and I called the number and it said, what stop are you, or type it in, and I just had this,
I understand.
and I couldn't get it, what about your phone?
Right.
So I walked home, because I didn't know if the bus was coming.
So the larger question you asked was, how do we engage the community as partners rather than as consumers, right? And as citizens, right? And by the way, the root word of citizens is the same root word as city, right? I mean, that's actually where it comes from. We think of citizenship as a national, right? Especially now, there's a big, national debate about who's a citizen and what does all that mean. But it comes from, it's a Roman word, it's a Latin word, and citizen and city are someone who lives in a city is a citizen. And of course, the city was Rome. So there was a sense of responsibility, right? It wasn't just, what has the city done for me lately? It was a sense that the city belonged to you. I think the public sector is actually, unfortunately, and here I know I have two of my bosses here, so it's maybe taking a little bit of a risk, but I think the public sector management profession took a wrong turn. We began to say we're professionals, and we're more like private sector CEOs. And we began to compare ourselves to that in a number of ways, in how we behaved, what our priorities were. So a lot more emphasis on the spreadsheet, and a lot less emphasis on serving citizens. And frankly, and this is where I'm taking a little bit of a stretch here, I think we got paid too much. I think we began to say, if I was running 2,000 people over in the private sector, I'd be making $750,000 and I'd be taking home stock options. And so I'm only getting paid $329,000, so I'm poor. I think that was the wrong way to look at the telescope, right? I think rather than compare ourselves to corporate CEOs, I think we need to be comparing ourselves to bus drivers and to garbage truck drivers and librarians. So I'm paid less than my predecessor, but I'm still paid really well. Now, of course, I have to find a place to live here, so that helps. But to not make it personal, but just I think we got into a mindset that said, we're the professionals, don't call us, we'll take care of it. And I think that was a wrong turn. By no means everybody, I don't want to paint a broad brush, but I think too many professional city managers sort of got the idea that our job is to run a smooth running machine and think of our customers. Let's keep our customers happy, but not really think of them. You are much closer to being our shareholders than you are to being our customers, because you actually own the government. I don't. When I move here, I will have exactly one vote. And you are the ones who are actually the fiduciaries, and you elect a board of directors. They are your representatives who have the fiduciary stewardship of this. So I think that the volunteership, it isn't just come and do paperwork. I think that people are doing research on the airport issue. That's an incredibly valuable. We couldn't buy that kind of. Now sometimes they give us a hard time because they think they're smarter than all of us, and maybe they are, maybe they are not. But I'm really glad they're doing that. They're doing that digging up, and I think that's a real valuable resource. And Sue has helped recruit a whole bunch of very talented CPAs and financial professionals who are going to serve on our city's first audit committee. Sue's also going to be a member of that. And we have half a dozen really remarkably talented people, of which the council is able to choose two very interesting Santa Monica residents. And they're doing a lot more than doing paperwork. They will have an opportunity to really contribute to the city. And of course, commissioners. We had and what all of you've done, either when you were a planning commissioner or on these task force. We have a lot of, we need more.
But that is a huge asset here in this city, and maybe more than in other cities.
I would agree with
and
that.
You'll see time after time, people who are residents who don't have an office or a job or being on a board or commission, coming up and presenting with strong facts and information that is every bit as good as, and in my opinion, 90% of the time, maybe 99% of the time, better than what we're getting out of the staff and from these recycled staff reports that keep saying the same thing. And it's huge. Without the city investing money, people come out and give of their time and their professional knowledge in a way that the city very often dismisses.
So again, this is not confined to Santa Monica, and I think it's almost just like when you go to your doctor. Sometimes your doctor like, oh yeah, you read something on the internet. Trust me, I went to medical school.
And then you turn out to be right.
So there is some of that just sort of inherent in any profession. I'm an attorney, you're not. So, you want to talk about the law, I'm an attorney, so don't talk.
One of the reasons Sue is on the council now is because she had already shown the knowledge and the experience.
Sure. And that's what the council, that's what you voters ought to be looking for, is people who can make a contribution. But two thoughts about your commentary. First of all, that was one of the things that my colleagues, they said, oh yeah, Santa Monica, fabulous. It's a great community. You get paid really well. Smart city council. But the citizens. And that's my colleagues' attitude. The folks who do what I do as a profession. It's like
we are authorities.
Sort of pests. And that's one of the reasons I came here, is because that's just not my attitude, because I started on the other side. I started as a pest. And so I don't view well-informed citizens. That said, I will here, and more importantly at the dais, I will defend our staff from sometimes really sort of personal attack that really has no place. They put their pants on one leg at a time. They've got a lot going on. They have sometimes pressures that other people don't fully appreciate, and they can't answer back. And so when they get raked over the coals, that will be my job, to stand up for them and say, you have every right to free speech, but that's really not healthy to question the ethics and the competency of the staff. You have every right to different opinions and present different facts and present different arguments, and that's helpful and useful, and it's certainly valuable to the city council. But I think that sometimes the blistering personal attacks are really counterproductive.
Next question was right here.
Hi, I'm Anjali Kronheim-Katz, newly on the Housing Commission with Michael, and in my day job do community organizing work. So tonight and last night at the study session, you were talking about getting into a really deep dialogue with citizens about those priorities you were talking about, but other issues. And like, we're starting to get to the surface tonight, but they're going to kick us out of this room at 9 o'clock.
Sure.
And I'm just wondering, in some of your past experience, what models of really getting into dialogue, because it takes longer than 2 minutes, it takes longer than 2 hours, and people have a limited time attention as well.
Great question, and I actually, because again, I followed Santa Monica over the last 30 years. I didn't live here, but I paid attention because Santa Monica has both had some of the biggest challenges of any city its size, but also had some of the most innovative leadership to try to grapple with those. So correct me if you have a different impression, but in many ways I think the whole, it went on forever, which is not ideal, but I think the whole loose effort was a pretty genuine deep engagement in critical issues. And again, I wasn't here for that, but from afar, comparing it to what happened in a lot of other communities, there was a real effort to go out into the community. The Civic Center master plan process seemed to engage with a lot of folks. And the way to do it is not for me to drone on with a PowerPoint for 20 minutes and then say, okay, now time for public comment, and you got 3 minutes. And that is the worst. A guy named Daniel Kemmis, who was the mayor of Missoula, Montana, and a Democrat, former Speaker of the Montana House of Representatives. He wrote a book called Community and the Politics of Place. It's a wonderful book. And he says public hearings are that place in American society where no one listens. And I think if you went to any of the hearings on the Heinz Project, no one was listening, right? They had their mind made up. It was either the worst thing to happen since ISIS, or it was, the salvation of affordable housing and jobs and progress and transit-oriented development, and not a lot of nuance in between, right? And that's fairly typical. So, what works better? Getting people around round tables who are not just talking to people who agree with them. Looking for common ground, looking for solutions, listening deeply, sharing what happens at this table with the larger group. And we found something, we had to do, Luce took, I think, 7 years or something like that. Anybody know? On the order.
Luce took 7 years.
Yeah. So we had to do the same thing in Pasadena in 18 months. We had to rewrite the entire general plan, not just the land use and circulation, but the entire general plan, start to finish. We literally threw out the old general plan. We started with blank sheets of paper. We had to do that, and then we had to go to the voters for ratification in 18 months. No other city, and I was the mayor. And co-chair with my political opposite of the general plan effort. And one of the things we knew we could not, we had such a tight schedule, we could not go back and fix something. Because if we had to go back and fix something, we'd miss the 18-month window. So every time we go through these very intense community listening efforts, and then we would come back. And one of the things we discovered in the first round was we asked people literally the question, did we hear you right? And then there'd be fierce debate about, we got this right, yeah, that's right. Oh, I'm not sure about that. And I remember vividly, there was one guy whose solution, whatever the problem was, the solution was jitneys, right? The solution to traffic was jitneys. The solution to affordable housing was jitneys. The solution to jobs was jitneys. And so he gets up at the part of this process where we're having this intense dialogue. Did we hear you right? And he says, no! He was actually Australian. He said, no, you didn't hear us right. There's nothing in here about jitneys. Jitneys are the solution to jobs, affordable housing. And normally, in a public hearing kind of setting, it's the job of the mayor to say, well, we held a number of public hearings, and we in fact discussed jitneys thoroughly, and blah, blah, blah. And then, you didn't hear me, you're a horse's ass, you're a crook, you're all these terrible things. But because we engaged in this community process, it was the audience who said, yes, we did hear you talk about jitneys, and we don't agree. That's why it's not in there. We heard you right, but they heard us right. The jitneys are a great idea, but they're not what we think are the solution to these big problems. So it was self-correcting, right? There was a kind of a consensus that emerged, rather than this polarized, what I called last night, the tastes great, less filling kind of dialogue in the depth, where...
Can I have your attention, please? The library will be closing in 30 minutes. The second floor restrooms will be closing in 15 minutes. If you need a library card, please go to the customer service desk immediately. Once again, we will be closing at 9 p.m. Thank you.
I have a library card, I can show you. You don't need to go there immediately. So anyway, I think that's it has to be genuine. People can smell fake input, right? Where we're really interested in hearing what you say, and then we're going to do exactly what we please. People are on to that, and I think actually that's why we haven't been doing as much of the deep listening, is I think people are fairly suspicious about that. So getting people's, sort of opening up people's trust that it is worth sitting down with people who we hate. One more thing. I know I've talked too long, but let me just say, I got this incredible experience where I talked to the slow growth neighborhood activist folks. And I say, the business community and Santa Monica Forward and Santa Monica Next, what I'm hearing from them is that you're calling them all kinds of names, and you're saying that they're shills for development, and they're all crooks, and they're paid off by the developers, and they're nothing but the tools of development interests, and they don't care about the community. They want to pave over the city, and they want to kill them, and they find that offensive, and they find it hurtful. And they say, well, but they say about us that we're selfish, NIMBY, only care about ourselves, trying to build a wall, won't allow anything reasonable. And I say, yeah, that sounds hurtful and offensive too. And so then they say, and by the way, they are in the pay of the developers. They are in the pockets. It's true. What they say about us is not true. What we say about them is true. And then, of course, you go over to the other side, and they say, they use these hit pieces against us, and they say these terrible things about us. It is true that they're selfish NIMBYs, and so in that environment, it's really hard to have the deep dialogue. But I'm convinced that the majority of people are neither selfish NIMBYs nor in the tank for the developers, that most people are like the people in this room. They care deeply about the community. They have differing views about how to advance that agenda.
We have like three last ones, Peter, then Patricia, and then Dolly.
You've been very kind. Thank you for the opportunity.
And that would be the last three.
You were talking about you're going to put your techie group together to work on projects. Have you thought about taking those techie group, the techies, and asking them to do what you did, go to lunch with some of the people in the field who are actually working? Because my experience has always been that some of the best ideas I've had as a teacher have often come from students.
You're absolutely right.
And you take what they thought and you put it into your plan, and then, it works. But, because we're looking for solutions here, not just grand plans.
No, that's a very good point, and I'll just ditto. Any, was there any?
Patricia's next.
So among the people who talk about Santa Monica as it once being a sleepy beach town, when it was a sleepy beach town, Jews, Mexicans, and Negroes weren't allowed. Those were the three words that were in the deed restrictions in my neighborhood. Weren't allowed to live here. So that was never my experience of Santa Monica. I grew up in Van Nuys, and when I got here, I thought I had died and gone to heaven, and I still think it's, for me, the best place in the world to live. I think it's a great city. One of the things that happens in the big community meetings, in 1984 when we did the Luce, we had a different format where we were looking at challenges and opportunities, and I believe we completed it in less than 2 years also. I'm not positive because it was a long time ago. But what happens sometimes in these community meetings where you have the round table, you have a staff person there who's supposed to be there as the facilitator and another one perhaps as the recorder, and then the people around the table do have a great sense of being led to choosing the options that were the favorites of their facilitator. And that's difficult. And on the Civic Center Working Group, we had similar experience. I only went to one of the meetings where we were given iPads, and we were looking at how we were going to finance the things that we wanted to do at the Civic Center. And, my first choice is always, let's raise progressive taxes. And there was no opportunity to put that into the computer. And so, you know, that was a case where we were truly prevented from expressing our views. Otherwise, I want you to know that I do think that the city council listens. I have members on the city council with whom I haven't had any agreements in years, but I still think that people try to listen and try to be responsive, and I think you've got a great city council by and large.
I agree with all of what you had to share.
Dahlia's next.
I just have a few things to say. The first is on the question of what to do with police, law enforcement being called out, or paramedics, and it becomes a case of either someone who's inebriated or a mental health thing. In two places where I've lived, we've worked on I think, reasonable solutions. One was in Santa Fe, which has under 100,000 population like we do. We got a grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and through having all the resources in the community, the people who work for the state in health and the providers of social and mental services and so forth, developed a program of someone always being accessible to triage every case. So you didn't have to take them somewhere. We went there. And the same thing in San Francisco when I ran a mental health clinic. There was one day a month where I was on call 24 hours. And I went everywhere, and I had a card which enabled me to do 72-hour holds when it was needed, long enough to get some kind of therapy and practice or what. So these things can be done, and we can do them if we look at what other communities are doing. And that's one thing I just want to point out.
Great points, and I take them to heart.
Yeah, and I just want to say just one more thing. This is not a hard community to become useful in. When I moved here back from Santa Fe, I thought, you know, what I want to be used here for what I know. And just by being involved in civic action and speaking at the Planning Commission when there was something I cared about or what, I started getting invited to give, you know, to be part of programs. And I really don't feel that we have a city staff that doesn't listen. And I don't feel that the community organizations like Forward or the Neighborhood Council, which you presented, at your event on Sunday, I was sitting between a prominent member of Santa Monica Forward and a prominent member of the Neighborhood Council, and we're all getting along. So we're not really as polarized as is portrayed.
Michael had a last comment.
So I just wanted to take advantage of, you said I don't have to put in a form of a question. And I thought this is something appropriate to say here in the Democratic Club. You said something about, you know, you're focusing on how to make the culture and the delivery of services better, and that, you know, we wouldn't care about that, we just want to get it. But I want to say that we do care about that, and we should as Democrats, because we're people who actually believe in government and the power of the government to do good. And I think the battle in this country is between, there's, you know, a third of the people who will never support government because it takes money out of their pocket. And there's a third of the people who will put up with anything, how inefficient and whatever, because they feel that what government does is so important that, you know, you've got to put up with that, and that's probably most of us in this room. But what really decides what role government's going to have and whether the Democratic Party is going to be in charge of the Republicans is whether we can show that the money is being spent effectively and efficiently to do important things. And so I think most of us love this city because not only you can affect what happens here, but it can be a model elsewhere. And so, you know, I would hope this group, I know I certainly am, want to be 100% behind you to make Santa Monica a model of how government can really work well for people. and support the values that we believe in. So that's
Very good words to end on. Thank
Those are the best answers. A strong thank you to our city manager, Rick Cole. Thank you, Rick. That's about it for our meeting today. Gives us time to get our act together. Mary Ann?
September 30th, Wednesday, downstairs in the auditorium. Our meeting will be focus on education. So, hope to see you there.
On September 30th. We look forward to that downstairs in the main auditorium. Have a wonderful week and another month, and we'll see you end of September. Thank you. Good night.